What's up? Welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacMovieGuy.com, and I have one important question for you. Who are you going to call? You're going to call Phoebe. Anyway, I'm a blind film critic, and this is a review of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. This is the fifth Ghostbusters film, fourth in the actual line of this series, the lineage, since they have kicked Melissa McCarthy's version out of the timeline. And it is currently available on Netflix with audio description, which Sony usually uses Motion Picture Solutions, seems like. And it is narrated by Andrea Breton. And dear Andrea is pronounced Dan Aykroyd. Aykroyd. There you go. That's your lesson for today. Nobody told you that, and they allowed you to make an entire audio description track with Aykroyd. Anyway, so yes, we are back, and basically this film stars Mackenna Grace, and she plays Phoebe, who is 15 and knows everything, and really is the only valid Ghostbuster at this point. It's been passed down to her from, the last film through her Spangler name, through the fact that she's apparently a genius. Like, Mensa, please show up and crown this achievement. She's talking about, like, quantum theory as in, like, a 15-year-old. So, yeah, she is, but she's also 15. And this series is going to rely heavily on nostalgia. So we're going to bring the team into the city. They're going to be in the original firehouse, which is somewhat decrepit now. The family's here, the fam. Basically, every character is back, whether they should be or not, whether the writers figured out a good reason for them to be or not. They were basically told by Sony, everybody's coming back, or I'm going to shoot your family in the face. I don't know, something. Because it feels like we are really shoehorning characters in here. Podcast just shows up because he's literally doing a podcast with Dan Aykroyd. And he is... they read various elements or something like that. They read, like... They do tachometry is kind of what it's called, where you figure out sort of like if something has like a spirit attached to it. Anyway, when Phoebe goes to like hang out with him or whatever, she's like, "What? Why are you here? And how are you here? I mean, like, you didn't move with your family and you're a minor. Like, how are you?" And he's like, "Yeah, my parents think I'm at space camp." I was like, "Forever?" Like, what? What? What are your parents like? Are your parents... My parents are, technically, their IQs are below 50, so it's really easy to... I just walked out the door one day, and I was like, "Going to space camp?" And they were like, sure you are. Come back whenever, It's just like, and then he runs off to, like, answer a call from his parents, like, and pretend he's at space camp. And I'm like, but till when? Like, when does he go home? Everybody knows camp is only for, like, a limited period of time. Meanwhile, he's got, like, this room. Anyway, so, yeah, the podcast is just here. Lucky now works for this paranormal research facility, because that's her skill set now. So she's moved up here, and Phoebe's brother is just like, "Lucky? What?" And of course the audience is like, "What are you doing here?" "Oh, that's right. You were contractually obligated to do a sequel. Why not?" So yeah, they find ways to bring everyone back. Of the original Ghostbusters team, you have basically anybody who would make sense, except like Rick Moranis and Sigourney Weaver at this point, which I'm sure if they make another Ghostbusters film, they will figure out a way how to get those two back in here. Even though Rick Moranis doesn't act anymore, they will figure out a way to get Rick Moranis in the film. Because we have Annie Potts has a little bit more of a substantial role. She even like kind of like towards the end helps sort of like bring everything together. She like there's a moment where like everybody has to like come together and she comes together with them and I'm like, why is she here? Why? Just because you're part of the Ghostbusters universe doesn't mean that you need to be present through everything. We can have a conversation with you. You know, like Phoebe could have reminded us that podcast is still in this realm if needed through like a Zoom conversation. You know what I'm saying? Like FaceTime him. Be like, hey, what's it like back home? I don't know. It's really boring ever since the ghosts went away. Miss you guys. See you later. Bye. You know, like, but no, they just moved everybody here. So the mayor is now the asshole from the first movie, has moved up to being mayor, which just really highlights politics, how we can all just fail upwards. And he still hates the Ghostbusters, even though the city loves the Ghostbusters. I think they played an actual Ghostbusters commercial for action figures during this. It was very meta. They were like, oh yeah, Ghostbusters, and then like it shows it felt like a really 80s commercial of kids playing with Ghostbusters toys. As if like that really happened. Like the thing that we did when we watched the movie and then we had Ghostbusters toys actually happened to the Ghostbusters in their world too. Like somebody made toys out of them. So yes, the plot of this film is first of all the reveal at the beginning with ice and everything is a bit much. Like we did not need that. Like leave some room for imagination so that we can be a little bit more open up. But I would have killed like the first 30 seconds to minute of the film, just cut that out. But Gil Keenan is not really a competent director. He's okay, but he's not, this is not a Jason Reitman film. This is a Gil Keenan film. I didn't like Monster House, so I'm not a big Gil Keenan fan. So yeah, he thinks it's cool to tease the thing, and then we learn all this lore. Oh my god, there's a lot of explaining about where this demon comes from and this ancient language that nobody can speak but doesn't even have a name. I don't think everybody actually ever gave this language a name. They didn't want to do that much research. So they come up with this lore and this legacy, and they come up with like stuff that sounds like it's very scientific and very historic. And they're like, oh yes, with the legend of the 7 realms and the 7 seas and the king of Peloponnesus, and he found his army, and you're just like, Anyway, so like Patton Oswalt's character is a dude who works in like a library that's basically there to just give you backstory on the demon. That's his whole purpose in life. They go visit him and he's just like, oh yes, this is what it's about. Kumail Nanjiani has a pretty big part here, which is weird. He gives a hard read at first. He goes and sells some of his grandma's stuff to, which I guess he's inherited, to Dan Aykroyd in his shop. When one of these things is a little orb thing that has like a ton of energy to it. And he sells it for like $50. Later on, it turns out he's really integral to the plot as well, and actually his lineage, his family lineage, and he probably should have paid attention to his grandmother. So he has to learn how to become an avatar pretty quickly. I don't know. We're cutting to the chase. So he's like the fire king or fire walker or something like that. But then he literally bends one of the beams, one of the proton blast beams. I'm like, is that fire? Like, does he just bend anything now? Like, he's a bender. This movie is really dumb. We have we have this thing, and it's getting all of the ghosts riled up, and there's a hint that the containment unit, which has just been filling up with ghosts this whole time in the original facility, is about to burst. It really is not looking good, but Ernie Hudson has been trying to build this like other facility to try to bring ghosts into to try to answer, how do we fix this? Like, what is the more long-term solution for this? Apparently his character became super useful since his introduction in the first film, and really scientific and everything. So he has come a long way. Bill Murray shows up to throw some pencils at Kumail Nanjiani, which is one of the funnier scenes in the film, because it makes no sense. It's just like he's like trying to figure out if Kumail is Venkman's just sitting there like asking him these weird questions, like if you were to eat a child, would you skin on or Skittles? I'm like, what kind of question is that? Who wrote that? Somebody thought that was funny. Like, somebody thought that was funny. So, honestly, him throwing pencils at Kumail Nanjiani was funnier than most of the stuff that was written for him to say. So, yeah, this film is led by Mackenna Grace. She's by far the most interesting thing in the film. Most of the characters are really horribly underwritten. They have characters with plots that are they've just completely ignored. I mean, she has this brother, from Stranger Things that is he dating Lucky? Like, are they still connected? It's really hard to tell. Their screen time is incredibly limited. They're limited to only like when the plot needs them instead of any sort of character development. So continuing to push them forward as characters doesn't happen. Paul Rudd is here, but he's just like, again, why are you here? Like the film could easily establish him in a much better way. But instead, every time he has an opportunity to justify why he's there, he always dances around it like a dumbass. And like, there's one time where he's in a place and they ask, "Are you her father?" And his answer is, "I'm her step teacher." Are you married to Carrie Coon or not? Like, what is the thing? They have no chemistry. They have conversations about co-parenting, but they have no chemistry. There's no romantic scene between the two of them where they're just like, I just wish I could have time for us. Like, I know that that's not like the most Ghostbustery thing to do, but character development is really a thing that's important to any film, regardless of what film you're doing. You can't just have people running around and have like recognizable faces and expect people to be like, ooh, shiny things, fun, cool. That's good. No, I mean, like, he has his character struggles with this whole like parenting thing, but it's like, are you even a parent? Like, it's so awkward. Every time him and Carrie Coon try to talk about their relationship to each other, it's just so awkward. And they don't have like any chemistry together. And then Carrie Coon's presence in this film is ridiculous. And the funny thing is that this is one of those things where I feel like the writers literally, like, they're whoever wrote this, their family was being held hostage, because a lot of this just doesn't make any sense. And instead they just decide to openly address it in the film as not making sense. So Carrie Coon's a Ghostbuster now, but and Phoebe is then told she can't be because she's 15, and she's really pissed off because she's like, in any other world, Mom, you'd be our receptionist. And she's right. Like, what did she do in the first, like, what is her skill set? What is her power? Like, I know that we're in this like strong female lead thing where women can do and be anything, but that doesn't mean that every single one of them needs to go kick ass and fight crime. You can have people who have complex feelings about like, well, that's not really my thing. Like, she can have like something else can be her thing. She doesn't like necessarily have to do that. She should be struggling with it more. Instead, she's just like, yeah, I do this now. And the film just doesn't really write that well. It's just like, well, instead they openly address it and have her child mock her for doing it. And that's the way to do it, because somebody corporately decided that Carrie Coon needed to be a Ghostbuster. So they're like, oh, well, I guess she's a Ghostbuster now. So we'll just have her child make fun of her because the audience thinks this is stupid. So we test screened this. The audience thinks it's stupid, so we'll go with it. Seriously, Mackenna Grace is like the best thing in this film. Does she make every right choice? No. I mean, when she goes in there to do the thing where I'm trying not to spoil everything with the I'll say experimental device. I was like, that's a bit much. Like, this is a smart girl. She wouldn't do that. Not for this moment. She's not going to do that. But basically, her main plot line is that she's saddled with a new ghost best friend, Melody, played by Emily Alyn Lind, who is really pretty good at walking the line as a good or bad character until they just can address it and they're like, no, she's bad. And I'm like, damn it. Well, stop treating your audiences like they're stupid. Like, let us figure out things for our own later on. Like we can't even wait for betrayal. We have to be told that she will be betrayed in advance. Like, we have to be given that heads up. And it's just, it's exhausting. This movie is not good. And I thought the last one was interesting. It had some stuff for it. It wasn't the best. Nothing has really topped the original. I actually like the Melissa McCarthy version more than I do either of these two nostalgic sequels. Although I think McKenna Grace is really good in both of them. And I think the way that they handled the kids in the first film felt more organically than they do a lot of the characters in this film. It's like they had a cast that made sense when they're out in the middle of nowhere, and now they're in the city and they have a sequel and they don't know what to do with these characters. So they're giving them things to do and jobs and places and to go, and none of it really makes any sense. Like, it's just all is one of the worst written scripts. But it feels like it's done under duress. Like, you have to include all of these characters in here. So you get a script that is overstuffed, but is underdeveloped and way undercooked, but still has to deliver this villain that has this crazy immense backstory that you're just like, you suddenly have to absorb. I'm going to push back on the critics, by the way, who are like, this is just a rehash of the first film. I'm like, this is nothing like the first film. You keep that out of your mouth. I'm going to slap you. Slap you. I've heard that. I was like, they're like, oh, this is just a retread of the first film. You go do 50 push-ups right now. 50 push-ups. You, sir, go, leave. No, it's nothing like the first film. That's an insult. Yeah, this is really just a weak film. Audio description wise, I don't know. I praise them for having such a broadcast and keeping up with them, especially towards some of the more climactic scenes when like everyone's involved. Like I said, like Janice got in there and I was like, why is she here? You know, I mean, like nobody was really paying attention to her before, but then she's all of a sudden she's like in on it. And I'm just like, why? You know, but like luckily I knew she was here to do that. So that's a positive. I didn't feel like the audio description for the ghost was very good. It kind of expected you to know what the ghost looked like already. Even the main ghost for the film, like the new demon, I thought he was really sort of underdeveloped. At times he's good, but he's like, I don't know, like a cloud of black smoke with eyes at some point. Like, it's just, is that the best you got? And his whole thing is like, he was a demon who was trying to figure out how to, the reason why like ice is his thing is because he was trying to get the chill down your spine or whatever, the death by fear or whatever. I don't know. They try to explain these things, and basically you get so scared that you just die, you know, and you freeze. And that was what this demon was trying to do before they many moons ago locked him in this tiny little ball, which they eventually let him out of. So yeah, it's a stretch, certainly, but I didn't think that the ghosts were necessarily that well described. Most of them, they expect you to know what they are. Slimer, for example. Of course Slimer's in here, because why not? You know, I mean, like, they got to keep that nostalgic branding going. and they've got these little mini Stay Puft Marshmallow things that really serve no purpose other than merchandising. Like, they don't do anything. They're like minions. They're like somebody watched Despicable Me and saw Minions and were like, ooh, we could do that for this franchise with the Stay Puft. We could make little Stay Puft Marshmallow Men. They'd be like Minions. But then they didn't give them anything to do. So, like, they're always just doing something stupid, like jumping into a pencil sharpener. And then, like, that's supposed to be funny. And it's like, oh, did you see it? It just got eaten up by the pencil sharpener. It's like, we're wasting time. You know, meanwhile, you can write these mini Stay Puft Marshmallow things in, but you can't give, like, Carrie, Coon, and Paul Rudd, like, an actual relationship. So, yeah. If you like this film, I don't know why, but kudos to you. Shiny things are pretty to look at, and I'm very nostalgic too, and I kind of understand that. But at the same time, I'm wearing a Ghostbuster shirt, so I was prone to like this. But at the same time, I realized they weren't really doing anything with these characters. You know, they don't really develop them. They kind of just shoehorn everybody in and put them in places, and then have them doing these sort of like random tasks so that they can be there for this plot. And it just feels like, why are you here? I think podcast being there is probably the best representation. Like, they couldn't even find a better reason for him to be there other than, I'm here for space camp. Like, he couldn't just be there to visit and happen to be there at the same time that this goes down. You know what I'm saying? Like, he couldn't have taken... do you realize how easy it would have been for them to write a storyline where Phoebe has to go meet him at the train station around the same time this is happening, and he's like, oh, I'm really excited to see the firehouse, you know, and she has to go show him the firehouse, and he's visiting for like the weekend, and then like all this stuff happens and he's there for it. Like, instead they go out of their way to do it the other way, which is like the far more complicated way of doing things. Same thing with Lucky. Like, why couldn't her relationship just have grown? Why does she have to work at a paranormal research facility? Very, very weird choices that they're making here. Giant leaps with certain characters. Yeah, I would love to tell you that this movie is good. I'd love to tell you that the audio description is great. The audio description is okay. And here's the breakdown. What you got to do for a Ghostbusters film is, first of all, honestly, people are there because of the ghosts. The ghosts in every Ghostbusters film have always been kind of different. They find different ways of doing it. Sometimes they're scary, sometimes they're goofy. And you have to figure out how to embrace that and in the moment. And you can't just tell us the name of the ghost, because that doesn't help me be scared of it or think it's funny. I would say... this is, I do follow sequels, right? So the rule of sequels, which is Slimer and Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, are two sort of iconic figures that have been mentioned before, so I care less that they've been described, but I didn't feel like anybody else was really well described. Melody is basically just like in human form playing with matchbooks, so she's fine. But I never really got a full grasp of the main character. And there was something else too. There was another ghost that kept being mentioned, and I didn't really understand what that was. So, whatever. It has a large ensemble cast that mostly does a pretty good job of balancing. Oh God, it's a really large ensemble cast. And then they bring these new characters in, and you're just like, what? So kudos to following. My God, I mean, like, as this franchise goes on, I'm assuming in the next film, Patton Oswalt and Kumail Nanjiani will have to show up for no apparent reason whatsoever. You know, like, we can't let anybody leave this franchise. So, yeah, I'm going to give Ghostbusters Frozen Empire a C-. That is boosted a little bit by the fact that I think mostly... I really enjoyed Mackenna Grace here. I want to say that wholeheartedly as a takeaway, in case you feel like it's a little bit high. Like, why not a D, right? Why not a D+ or something like that? I thought Mackenna Grace did a really good job. I thought Emily Alyn Lind did a really good job. I would not have revealed her character in the way that they do. I don't even have a problem spoiling it because the film is so asinine with her character anyway. Plus, she's like a ghost that plays with matches. Like, I was already suspicious of her anyway. You didn't need to seal the deal before the time. I thought, for the most part, I felt like the original cast was engaged. I mean, the OG Ghostbusters, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie, Hudson, I felt like they all showed up to try to really, truly participate in this and not just phone it in for paychecks. And the rest of it is it's poorly written, it's poorly directed. That's the thing. I don't actually think there is a bad performance in this film. I don't know that there is like one actor that I was just like, oh, this performance is bad. I think everything was just poorly written and they weren't being given the right things to do or make sense. So this is a very poorly written film, and directed by Gil Keenan. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I will see you guys on the other side.